Okay, oh, we're going. Okay. Hey, welcome to Cross Examined. I'm Malloy, got Christina and Matt.
Hey.
Matt's going to do that hipster thing. Okay, so we're starting our new series called Budding Theology. Matt's idea. I actually like it because we're getting into Calvinism,
These names,
Arminianism, Molinism, and I guess everything in between. So, and those are all founded by different kinds of flowers. So, you know. Anyways, we're going to be focusing on different points of them, and we're focusing on the first point of each tonight. Christina, if you're ready, would you like to share first the first point of Calvinism?
I suppose so. Sure. So Calvinism, you have the acronym TULIP. First point is the T, which stands for total depravity. I was reading an article by John Piper on it, and I liked the way he starts it out. It just sort of defines total depravity, and depravity in general. It says, when we speak of man's depravity, we mean man's natural condition apart from any grace exerted by God to restrain or transform man. So when we're talking about total depravity, it's not like us under God's grace, because obviously under God's grace, we can do good and serve him. But it's talking about our natural state completely apart from any grace from God. And I think we can find scripture that does point to complete and total depravity, which means that on our own we cannot do any good. We cannot please God at all. We see this in verses like you got Romans 3:9-11, which says, well, then, should we conclude that we Jews are better than others? No, not at all. For we have already shown that all people, whether Jews or Gentiles, are under the power of sin. As Scripture says, no one is righteous, not even one. No one is truly seeking, or no one is truly wise. No one is seeking God. You have Romans 8:7-8. The mind governed by the flesh is hostile to God. It does not submit to God's law, nor can it do so. Those who are in the realm of the flesh cannot please God. Let me see if I have any other ones. You got Paul in Romans 7:18 again. I know that nothing good lives in me, that is in my sinful nature. I want to do what is right, but I can't. Got Ephesians 2:1 as well. Once you were dead because of your disobedience and your many sins, you used to live in sin just like the rest of the world, obeying the devil, the commander of the powers of the unseen world. So that one even describes us as dead. And I think that's a good analogy because dead people can't do anything for themselves. They're completely incapable of making themselves alive again. And it's only through God's grace that we can even begin to shake off that any part of our depravity. Yeah, there's a basic rundown of first point of Calvinism.
Okay, Matt, do you want to respond first?
I'm sorry. Is this a response or a putting forth the?
Just a response. We'll do responses first, and then we'll jump to your point and my point next.
As far as the total depravity, I think a lot of that's taken out of context by Calvinists, and that a lot of the verses that are used to back up, particularly total depravity, the rest of Tulip too, which we'll get to in the coming weeks, but particularly total depravity, are often talking about the church as a whole and less. So I feel like, at least in some cases, it's taken out of context, and or that it's for a specific situation. I don't know, kind of.
Sorry, you broke up a bit there at the end. So can you get that last part?
No, that's fine.
Oh, okay. All right, cool.
I knew that was kind of a weak statement because I'm unsure of how to phrase it any better. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
I don't know that.
So what I'm looking at for total depravity, on a personal level, I do agree that on their own, we should not choose God. How do I word this again? Spontaneous wording. But almost like there's what's the phrase? Believing in like a permeating grace that, in the sense that when we see, like we even see Bible verses such as like Matthew 5:47. Why don't you go read it? And if you greet only your brothers, what are you doing out of the ordinary? Don't even Gentiles do the same? Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. You know, it identifies that there are these non-Jews, these non-people of God, who are able to do good things, even if those aren't exceptionally good things. So, I guess I'm not necessarily disagreeing with the point of total depravity as much as I would add this idea of a permeating grace, that not everyone is going to do evil all the time, even if they don't necessarily know God.
Right, and like total depravity doesn't say that non-believers can't do good things. I mean, obviously, we see some non-believers are doing things that aren't bad. Maybe some that would even be considered good. But, you know, God looks at our heart, and they're doing those things not to glorify God. I'm not going to speak to everyone's motives, but I would say a lot of them are probably doing it for attention and for selfish motives. And even if they're not, even if they're trying to, you know, actually help somebody, then it's still not going to be counted as righteousness because it's not done for the glory of God.
Right. Yeah, I think that was my only caveat of the response from personal views, because again, most Calvinists I know don't hold the view that like there's no such thing as someone being able to do something good who's non-Christian, but like just throwing in my own thoughts of like a permeating grace kind of deal. So that was my response on that. Matt, you want to go next, or you want me to do Molinism?
Go ahead.
Okay. Molinism is kind of like the middle between Calvinism and Arminianism. Molinism has the idea of roses. The R, which is what I'm going to discuss, being radical depravity. It agrees with a lot of, it's almost like we were talking about it a bit beforehand. It's almost like it's Calvinism with just a couple differences, and a lot of what I noticed. And so radical depravity is the sense that we're all depraved. Like we all have that natural depravity. But we humans have a range of choices that we can do, and we make these according to our nature, but our nature is sin, so we're not capable of choosing God. And a lot of what it adds is Calvinists have natural knowledge and free knowledge. Natural knowledge is that God knows everything that could happen, and he knows, you know, all the possibilities. Let's see. Free knowledge. I got notes here, so I'm trying to use those so I don't mess up my definitions. God knows everything that will happen in free knowledge. He has like this expansive, endless knowledge of everything in reality. So Molinism adds another layer to that, and they call that the middle knowledge. And that means he knows everything that would happen. Like, say, instead of seeing it as a single path that we're predestined down, there's almost multiple options. There's multiple options, and he sees down all of those. He knows all of those. The justification being for, well, actually, I'll just save that for my second point on that. But that's the basic thing of radical depravity that adds that new layer of knowledge, and I'll save it from there. So, whoever wants to respond first, Christina or Matt.
Okay. Can you say that again?
I had something that I was going to say, and it just left. And I can't remember what it was. Because I was trying to figure out middle knowledge.
Well, I was saying...
I like you're saying. They are very similar. And, I remember what it was. I don't remember if this is a specific Calvinist doctrine or if I learned it somewhere else, but I did hear this concept of what was called general grace and specific grace. And you've got God offering general grace to basically the world at large, even non-believers. And that is God. Basically, it says that even Gentiles, have a knowledge of God's word through natural revelation, or of God's law through natural revelation.
That's the term I was trying earlier. When I was like permeating grace.
What?
Well, sorry, when I was responding earlier and I was like permeating grace, that's what I was trying to think of, general grace. So yeah.
Yeah, that's probably about the same thing. So yeah, that is what keeps man from being as bad as he could possibly be. Then you have specific grace, which is the grace that leads to salvation, which is not general grace. But so yeah, when I was thinking about the definition of depravity, I would say would be without any grace. So I still think without any grace, men would be totally depraved, and it's only by that general grace of God that we aren't as bad as we could possibly be.
Okay. So, quick question in response to that, because you know more about Calvinism than me. Is general grace a common belief within Calvinism? If you don't know off the top, I totally
off the top of my head, I'm not sure. I'm thinking yes, but don't quote me on that because I might be wrong.
Matt?
I learned about it from a Calvinist, so that's all I know.
From the Calvinists that I've had the pleasure to be acquainted, yes, they would believe in that. The ones that I know. Now, is that an overarching belief? I have no idea. I'm not a Calvinist.
Okay. Anything else we got here before we jump into Matt's Arminianism?
Daisy.
The daisies. Apparently there's a wheat too, but it's not a flower, so I'm not going to talk about it.
Wheat?
I mean, wheat makes flour.
I'm sorry, say that again. I'm sorry, you totally broke up there.
That wheat makes flour, if you think about it.
Not that kind of flour. Wrong flour. Boo.
Hey, you can't make biscuits with daisies, man.
Challenge accepted.
Yeah. Matt, you want to run with it?
Sure. Okay. So, I've been reading about this, and the whole thing about Arminianism, that's correct for a very long time. So, I'm going to actually get this from a guy, his name is Aaron Earls. So this is how he breaks down the little letters. For what he uses is, and by that he's talking about humans choose to sin based on their own will.
Me again. I'm sorry. Sorry. What's Earl say? You broke up for me. I got Earl.
Aaron Earls.
Earls.
Aaron. His name is Aaron.
Oh.
The way that he breaks it down is deliberate sin is the first one. In other words, humans, they're not forced to sin. We have a sinful direction. Yes, we still have the choice whether to sin or not. If we decide not to, we won't. Typically, we do. It works. That's how humanity works. We do what's best for us, but there's no overarching force. There's no overarching sinful nature that is purposely making us choose sin. So, in other words, unlike Molinism and Calvinism, we have a choice at all times from the moment we are born to choose to do good. Of course, we don't, as we know in the Bible. Romans 3:23 is for all have sinned, that sort of thing. But is that there is nothing anywhere that says that we are forced or we are required to sin, just that we typically choose to do so. With the exception of Jesus. Obviously.
Obviously.
Well, he was 100% man, even if he was 100% God. So he had all the same temptations. And that's
Right.
part of the argument most Arminians use, is that Jesus was man. If he was 100% man, and then he would have had some sort. As far as the man side, obviously the God side is pure God, not sinful. So if you would have taken away his, lack of a better term, humanitarian derived choice to sin, then it would have been impossible for him to take our sin. Yeah, that wording was good, sort of.
I didn't hear it. I'm sorry. I heard about half of that whole spiel.
I know Jesus did not sin, and he was fully human. He has to be fully human as well as fully God, and he did not sin.
Right. But the argument is, and I will preface this, I'm not Arminian. Sorry, guys. If I'm wrong, at me. My name will be somewhere, I'm sure. Maybe. Who cares? But the argument is, if Jesus, you got Jesus. This half is God. This half is man. But it's still 100% on either side. So if his human half, we're going to shift it over, would have to have a sin nature. We know this because Jesus was tempted for 40 days by the devil. Foosball. Foosball is the devil. He was tempted by foosball.
Fact. That's my Jesus.
Sorry. Wrong. Huh?
Sorry, I was like, that's my Jesus.
Redneck Jesus. But Jesus was tempted. We know this. The Bible tells us that he was subject to all of the temptations of man, greed, all of that crap. But he never did sin. So the argument is, if he didn't, it's because he was able to choose to not do so through his human nature. So he had a sin nature, but he was able to naturally overcome it without the God half having to step in and, to keep it working.
Okay.
Yeah, I disagree with that. Like all of it. Because well, okay, you look at Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve did not have to sin. They had that choice between obeying God or not obeying God. And they did make the choice to sin. And you said that everybody has that choice. So I would say that when you say that, you sort of put them on the same level as Adam and Eve there. But because of Adam and Eve, the world is cursed. Humanity is cursed. And that's why we have that sin nature, which I don't know that I would call it like a force that makes us choose evil, but it's in our nature that we can't choose good on our own.
The idea is that our sin nature, I like the metaphor of Adam and Eve. Our sin nature would be like the serpent, persuasive but not forceful. We do it of our own volition, but there is no reason that we should have to. We do because we do. But it's more of our sin nature persuades us to sin, not forces us or makes us incapable of not doing so.
Okay.
So the idea is...
I get what you're saying.
Okay. Well, the idea is that they kind of agree with Calvinism in that everybody sins. That we have no control over it.
I wouldn't say that it's like so much that we have... I wouldn't say it's about control and freedom so much as it's about our nature, like who we are as human beings, because of as after the fall human beings. So it's more nature than choice. It's like, yeah, we have the choice. The choice is before us, every decision we make, but we can't choose it because of our nature.
If we can't choose it, then it's not a choice, whether it's from our nature or otherwise.
That depends on your view of freedom.
Choose, then it's not a choice.
Huh?
Definition of choice. If you cannot choose, then it's not a choice. That is the definition of choice.
Mm-hmm.
Well, similar to the definition of choice.
I mean, obviously, Jesus could choose good because he was not a fallen man.
Right, but it's him being able to choose evil, which he decided not to, is the argument.
Wait,
Again,
what?
Jesus being able to choose good necessitates him being able to choose not good. Whether we're talking about in between.
I would not agree with that. I would argue that Jesus was incapable of sinning because he was God. I do believe that he was tempted.
So he's incapable, and yet he's God, therefore all-powerful. If he's incapable, he's not all-powerful.
Oh, no. I completely disagree with that. I think being all-powerful would... I think that being unable to choose doing wrong would make him more powerful. The option of doing wrong, I think, would lessen his power.
That doesn't make any logical sense, but okay.
I'll just get
if I was able to
a choice to do something bad,
stupid, I think that would make me more powerful than if I had the choice to do something stupid.
I disagree, because there would be no ability for merged. I'm going to use an example. This is a gaming group. I'm going to use an example from Dungeons and Dragons, because this is for a gaming group.
Yes.
I have a paladin. My paladin cannot choose to torture a prisoner. Okay, great. He's never going to torture the guy. But you get your chaotic good rogue in there, who's allowed to torture the crap out of him, that doesn't. Not because he can't, but because he has mercy on that prisoner.
Right. Okay. You're still talking in like... I mean, I think God's on a completely different level than that. God is merciful. That is who he is. For the rogue, the rogue can choose to be merciful. He could also choose to not be merciful.
God can...
and either way, that would still be consistent with his character. Whichever way he chose, whatever he chose, that would be consistent with his character. God is merciful. That is who he is. So it is completely against his character if he chose to not be merciful. So therefore, he cannot choose to not be merciful because he is necessarily merciful.
I'm not saying he would choose to do evil, but he has the capacity to do so. And what makes him so good, what makes him so powerful, what makes him God is a refusal on the basis levels to
I disagree with that.
Yeah, so response on my end, but what Matt was saying, as well as the discussion we just had. For one, there was a sin nature that was taken on in the garden, that we took on a nature of Satan. So we are naturally pre-inclined towards evil, and that's where things like general grace stuff come in. I do agree with Matt's choice, actually, because not Matt's choice. We're talking about choices so much. I feel like I'm playing an RPG. Anyways, I do agree with Matt's thoughts about God being infinite and choosing good. That's more of from an apologetics philosophy kind of view. Example: when you have what happens when the unstoppable force meets the immovable rock? What it creates is an infinite number of realities where the unstoppable force has moved the rock, and an infinite amount of universes where the rock has not been moved, and an infinite amount of universes where nothing happens. So when we're talking about God, he's capable of doing anything because he is God, but he infinitely chooses to not be those things.
Exactly.
So, which also kind of gets an idea of what sin is anyway. Sin is disobedience. Sin is not being what God made you to be. So it's being away from that. Anyways, that's just my response. I think to start my next point of radical depravity, I'll start this time, and then Christina or Matt can go next after they respond to me. Getting back into radical depravity a bit, one of the things about middle knowledge and what Molinism is trying to tackle when it comes to its first letter is different conclusions people struggle with Calvinism. So a lot of what people come up with in these debates is, well, if man is predestined, what happened in the garden? Was man predestined to choose sin? And if he was predestined to choose sin, then did God create sin? And you create all these very complicated things to deal with. There's that. Gosh, I should have wrote these parts down in notes. But you create complicated issues like that. Like, did God create sin? Therefore, not saying did God sin, but did God create sin? I think, the quote I had from there was R.C. Sproul Jr., where he says that, of course, it's impossible for God to do evil. He can't sin. This objection is, however, off the mark. I'm not accusing God of sinning. I'm suggesting that he created sin. Obviously, none of us want to say that. But that's one of the things Molinism is essentially trying to tackle, that God did not create sin, but that we have multiple choices. Thanks to middle knowledge, God is aware of all the conclusions and all the paths that we could possibly go on while still making them possible. Man can still be free while God is still aware. And that seems to be the idea being presented here. Anyways, my stuff. Go ahead. Whoever wants to respond first.
Yeah, it's hard because I feel like Molinism and Calvinism are extremely.
Yeah.
And so it's not like I'm like, oh no, you're wrong about this. I just think it's worded slightly different in the long run.
It's Calvinism with extra steps.
Right, yeah. Who wants to deal with middle knowledge? No one.
Point Calvinist. So, whoever wants to get what?
Go for it, Matt.
I kind of agree. Even through Arminianism, I really don't know what to say.
See, Molinism is
Malloy,
like the middle one that everybody's just like, oh yeah, okay, you're good.
Yeah, I think it's good because it's trying to tackle those fishy questions. Because, like, how could we be predestined? Like, example, when we look at predestination, here's something you respond to, because this is what I was trying to remember earlier. Thank you, God. Anyways, predestination, like some people being predestined, like elects called, and we might be jumping to other stuff, but we can lightly jump in it, but might be predestined and called, but others are not. And that kind of gets like, why would God predestine some people to not be elect? And that's when it gets complicated. So Molinism introduces the concept of middle knowledge to explain this, that like people have the choice still, even if, and God is aware of all decisions down that way. So
you're breaking up. I have no idea what you're saying.
I'm sorry. I'll repeat it.
My head around middle knowledge, because I don't know, it seems unnecessary to me. Because honestly, the issue with the elect and non-elect, I have struggled with that a lot. That was one of the major problems I had with Calvinism. And sometimes I still do. Some days I'm just like, man, I really hate this aspect of it. But, you know, if you think about God being all sovereign, the verse that comes to mind is like, I believe it's in Isaiah, where it talks about God's ways being higher than our ways, his thoughts higher than our thoughts. You know, we just don't know why some people are elected and some people aren't.
What seems to be the problem? Bad cramps, even when it's not my period. Hold on.
What?
Stop. Sorry, something started randomly playing on the tab.
No. Okay. Sorry.
Oh, I'm so sorry about that. I lost my train of thought.
Okay. Wait, let me repeat what I said to Matt. Because Matt, I broke up when telling Matt my little thing. So, anyways, what I said is that Molinism is tackling the issue of Calvinism, which is like, how can God make some people elect, like predestine them to be the elect, and predestine others to not be the elect? How can He do that and still not still be just? So Molinism's idea of middle knowledge is one of the ways it helps answer that, by creating that God is aware of all possible routes. So He's still infinite in His knowledge, but there's still multiple options.
So yeah, I don't know where exactly I stand on that yet. I'm still kind of doing research on that and looking into some options. One that God knows who's going to choose Him, and so that's who He elects. Is that foreknowledge maybe?
Yeah, that's foreknowledge, kind of what they're looking for.
Right. Yeah. So which I personally think is a lot simpler than middle knowledge. I just think middle knowledge complicates it way too much, when ultimately there are aspects of God where we have to just be like, okay, I don't know why that is, or maybe it doesn't make sense, but
right.
That's why I think middle knowledge is unnecessary. I think it's trying to explain one of those things that we can't explain.
Yeah. Another thing I would add, this might actually help discussion. Honestly, I don't know. Part of me is like, I think this is a bad metaphor, so feel free to roast it. But my girlfriend thought it was good, so feel free to roast my thoughts. Anyways, the metaphor I was looking for at explaining the way I was seeing the Molinism, doing all this research. Arminianism, like Matt was saying, Arminianism, the theology is they can just resist sin. You're always capable of resisting. You just choose not to. So I imagine Arminianism has a room filled with doors. They're all unlocked. You can go through any door. They're all there. Calvinism is this idea while there might be other doors, you're just going to pick that one door. It's almost as if they're all locked, because you're just going to pick that one door. While Molinism has multiple options open, but not everything is open, because you do have a sinful nature. That was just my way of trying to make it make sense in my head with metaphors, because images are my thing. So
I guess maybe, I don't know. That seems kind of weird, because I don't know. I guess it would depend on if the doors are labeled. I could see that if the doors are labeled. But if it's just a door, I kind of think, well, you don't know what's on the other side of the door. You don't know what's right.
That's a good response to that, actually. That's a good response to that metaphor, actually.
Right. So, and I know in the Bible it talks about how even non-Christians, even the Gentiles, they knew what was right. But they didn't do it, because they didn't want to. They didn't follow God. They didn't have any desire to glorify God, and so even though they chose to do something else. So yeah, I kind of feel like that's my problem with the door metaphor. Unless maybe they're glass doors, I guess that would kind of fix it, if you could see kind of what was on the other side.
Yeah.
Oh, this door's good and this door's bad, but I want to go through this one anyway.
Although kind of in a way, what you were saying kind of leads back into what we were talking about earlier, because the Gentiles know right from wrong, but they choose not to follow that route.
Right.
See? So that's another example where that middle knowledge might come in, where God's aware of all the decisions, but there's still multiple routes we can take. No predestination. So, I don't know. I think predestination is almost everyone's major holdup with Calvinism. Anytime I hear anyone
pretty much
get mad at Calvinism, it's predestination.
Yeah.
Right. That's really a point of a different video.
Yeah, that's definitely a different video. It's hard not to get into
whole video. It is, yeah. Maybe we should have done this one on a episode and talked the whole thing.
Oh, you broke up. Stop breaking up with me.
So maybe we should have done this one all at once in an extra long special event episode.
Yeah. I don't know how many could commit to that long of a video.
Yeah.
We have to record it all at once.
I like doing it piece by piece. I think it's going to be good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Whatever.
So I guess Christina or Matt, if you guys want to add anything more on your first point.
No, Arminianism is pretty straightforward. I mean, once the point's explained, it's pretty covered.
Yeah, there was something to add to mine. I forgot to say in my first one. It was in my notes. It was again going back to the John Piper article that I read, and he said that he gave basically 4 points, 4 ways in which our depravity is total. And I liked the way he said them because I think it explained it pretty well. The first one was our rebellion against God is total. Obviously, if we're not living for God, we're against God. There's no in between there. We're either with God or we're against God. And so if we're not following him, then our rebellion against him is total. In his total rebellion, everything man does is sin. And he did give a verse for this one, which, oh, wait, where'd it go? If I can get it to come up. I had it up, and then it went away. I'll come back to it if it comes up. The third one was man's inability to submit to God and do good is total. So that's going back to the sin nature again. Like, we know what's right and wrong, but we're going to choose wrong. Just because our nature is incapable of choosing good. And then lastly, our rebellion is totally deserving of eternal punishment. And so that kind of, we can do good things. If we're not following God, it's not impossible to possibly do an action that might be perceived as good. But God doesn't have like a level of like, hey, this sin is worse than this sin, or like this sin's not very important. God sees all sin as sin. If we sin one time, then we deserve eternal punishment. That's what the Bible teaches. So, regardless of whether we're like going out and killing a bunch of people, or maybe we've just told like some lies, either way, we're still in rebellion against God completely and totally. So the result is going to be the same, no matter how it brings itself out in our lives, how our rebellion brings itself out.
Cool. And
my Bible verse still isn't coming up, so I'm gonna see if I can find it in my actual Bible.
All right. I guess I'll just respond while you look it up, and you can be like, "Yeah, I got it." Now, what was your second point in that?
It was in his total rebellion, everything man does is sin. And if you hold on, I think I've got the verse for that. Where did it go? Oh yeah, it's in the section where Paul's talking about like the food and what you should eat. And like he's basically, there's this thing going on about how like if you should eat meat offers to idols or whatever, and he's saying it's not like inherently wrong, but if it causes someone else to sin, don't do it. And if you hurt somebody else by eating it, then it does become wrong. And then at the end, he ends it with, whoever doubts stands condemned if he eats, because his eating is not from faith, and everything that is not from faith is sin. So basically, I get what that's saying is the act might not be against the law, even the law of God, but if you're not doing it for the glory of God, if you're doing it for selfish reasons or any other reason besides the glory of God, then it's going to be sin. So yeah, that was the verse for that point there. I probably explained that really poorly, but it made sense in my head.
I have no idea what your entire point was, because you were full time on the sound. Sorry.
So sad.
I will respond to points, I guess. So the second point I was thinking of, because this came up while reading the Molinism. Let me find the page. Well, no, I'll just quote what I remember it saying. That, again, this is where we get the whole general grace deal. that not everyone is as sinful as they could be. The example page I read used was even Hitler loved his mother kind of deal. Like even people who are really evil have these like little things that they obviously aren't. So I guess disagreeing with the second point in part, just because not everything we do is sinful, essentially. Not till there's revelation. Yeah, I'll get to that later when that comes up. First point, I do agree we're all in rebellion. That one's hard for me to respond to because it's like we are in rebellion, but it's almost more like in Romans when Paul's talking about how he's a slave to his flesh. It's more like a slave kind of deal, even though we are in rebellion.
Right.
So that was hard for me to respond to because yes, I can think of Bible verses like in Romans where it says we are all in rebellion, but then I also think in Romans where Paul's talking about how he's a slave to his own flesh and how he doesn't have a choice but to follow his flesh. So struggle with that one. Matt, you got anything?
Pretty well covered it.
I had to mirror my argument. He's strangely silent.
I think we pretty.
Okay. Yeah, this topic's been hard to it's not hard to cover. It's just that the Molinism and Calvinism especially, because you're like, oh, they're close enough where you're like, I sort of agree with that, and then I sort of don't. And
right.
There's even points of Arminianism. I mean, obviously, because Arminians believe in multiple choices. There's the obvious divide between being able to resist all sin or not. Anyways, I guess we'll just get in closing thoughts. I'll just go ahead and do mine. I do actually tend to lean towards Molinism just because when we create this environment of predestination, total depravity, it does create those fishy situations of like God creating sin, people being predestined and pre-created to go to hell, which we're going to hit predestination eventually. So we'll get into that specifics. But when we get into that, it creates kind of issues for that. And I also would, the way I would phrase this, God is totally 100% capable of anything. He's all powerful, all knowing, omnipresent. So him not having the ability to give humans free choice to an extent is placing a limitation. If he cannot be simultaneously all-knowing and human beings still have more than one choice, then that's actually placing a limitation. Which I don't know if that's how normal Calvinists would even word predestination, but that's my response to it. Also, just quick note, I don't think most people in general are all 5 points of whatever view. I know a lot of Calvinists who aren't all 5 points, Molinists who aren't 5 points, and Arminians aren't all 5 points. So even though we're all hitting it from just one viewpoint, it's okay if people watching aren't 100% on board with all the views of whatever view they are. Anyways, my closing thoughts.
I see that pretty well the same way. I've considered myself a Molinist for quite a while. Pretty well since I started looking at them. But, Lloyd, you're absolutely right. Most people that I know, at least, aren't 5-point Calvinists or 5-point Arminians or even 5-point Molinists. So they're somewhere in the middle. You do have the ones that are, but they're typically the fringe, even of their own belief systems and things like that. So it's totally cool if the viewer, us, the debater people, fall somewhere in the middle. And as long as you're holding to your primary doctrine, a lot of what we talk about on this show is secondary doctrine, which is kind of cool.
Sorry, you can't be a Calvinist. I'm sorry.
Oh, except for Calvinism. You can't believe in Calvinism. John Calvin was a heretic, and he's burning in hell. So that's cool.
I don't even know how to deal with you guys.
You don't. That's the answer.
Oh man.
Oh, is it my turn?
Yes. Yes.
That's why God gave you the free will to hit that hang up button.
Oh.
I'm choosing not to. So yeah, for my closing statements, I just want to kind of make a preface for probably the whole series. I know that Calvinism gets a bad rap.
Wait.
There's a lot of crazy people out there. What?
Up super bad.
Super bad? Oh no. Do I start over?
I got to preface. You want a preface?
Right, for the series. Calvinists get a bad rap. And there's a lot of people who are Calvinists that take it way too far, and they're crazy. And I mean, just like with any Christianity, there's those Christians that no one wants to identify with because they're crazy. And they make all the other Christians look bad. Same with Calvinism. I think what people tend to forget is Calvinism is, it's soteriology right there, which is basically a view on salvation, which does affect an entire theology, but Calvinism itself is not an entire theology. Yeah. It's a view on the aspect of theology that deals with salvation. And when we take it outside of that, we get into a lot of muddy waters. And also that means that there are different kinds of Calvinism. Calvinists can believe different things. And they can bring other aspects of theology into Calvinism in different ways, where it's still Calvinism. And I think a lot of people tend to forget that. So yeah, while we're doing these, just remember Calvinists aren't all crazy, and it's not a complete theology, it's a view on salvation. So don't take it somewhere it's not.
Right. All right, these are good thoughts. I feel like this is a good first episode. Everybody, thanks for jumping in. We're going to hit the next one next week.
Bye.